Good afternoon, Rabbi. We were asked by some friends regarding the issue of a non-Jew keeping Shabbat. Are they allowed to keep Shabbat like the Jews do? Are they allowed to study Torah like the Jews do? And also, are they allowed to keep the other mitzvot, the rest of the mitzvot, 613 mitzvot that we have, the Jews that we keep? Are they allowed to keep them like we do or not? That's the question. Where is the answer provided? It's in the Gemara, Masechet Sanhedrin, Nun Chet Amud Bet. It says over there, it says Resh Lakish, that a non-Jew who keeps the Shabbat, he's liable to death. What does that mean, he's liable to death? That means from the heaven, they may kill him. They may kill him for that. They may terminate his life because he's doing something which he's not allowed to do. Not that we on the earthly court, we kill them. That's not the issue. We don't kill him for that. It's the heavenly court that's the problem. So it says over there, and Rashi explains, Rashi, that we're talking about how does a goy keep Shabbat. It's talking about the fact that he refrains from doing all labor, his labor, for 24 hours all throughout Shabbat, just like the Jews do. If he does it this way, so then he's liable, like we said. So you can infer from there several things. Number one is that if he refrains from doing some of the labors, but not all of them, so this is okay. We're not talking about that. Rashi says we're talking about where he refrains from doing all his labor, all his melacha, for 24 hours. So if he refrains from some of it, that's not a problem. Also, if you refrain some time of the day from doing labor, that's also not a problem. It has to be throughout the whole day he refrains, just like the Jews do, 24 hours of Shabbat. That's the idea. So if they do that, so then they are liable. So this is the halacha also, which is brought down in the Rambam, Laws of Kings, Perek Yud, halacha tet. It says over there the same thing, like we just mentioned, that a goy is not allowed to keep Shabbat. Same thing also applies, similarly, to a goy who studies Torah. It says over there in Daf Nun Tet in the Gemara, Nun Tet Amud Aleph, that also a non-Jew who studies Torah is also liable to death by the heavenly court. So what's the issue over there? The Gemara asks a very sharp question right away. The question is, but don't we have a baraita that says that a non-Jew who studies Torah is considered to be holy like the high priest, the Kohen Gadol? So then how can we say that they're not allowed to do it and they're liable to death? So answers the Gemara, when they're dealing with their mitzvot, the Sheva mitzvot, the Shebnei Noach, the 7 mitzvot of the Noachites, so they're considered to be holy like the Kohen Gadol, like the high priest. But when they're doing the Torah that we have to keep, when they're studying that Torah, the 613 mitzvot, so over there, they're liable to death from the heavenly court. That's the idea. So this is a very fine line that a person has to understand. So what does that mean? If let's say, for instance, a goy wants to study Torah, he has to make sure that he draws the line in the right place and not to go overboard, right? In order that he should make himself liable, God forbid, to punishment. Says the Rambam right after that in the next paragraph in Yud and 10, he says over there, but if the non-Jew wants to do all the other mitzvot of the Torah, 630 mitzvot, whether it's kosher, kashrut, tefillin, or lighting Hanukkah candles, or whatever, all these kinds of things, keeping Purim, all kinds of things like this, they're allowed to do all these things, or keeping the laws of Nidah, right, Tarat Mishpacha, family purity, they're allowed to do that too if they want. So if they wanted to keep these laws like the Jews do, they're allowed to keep all the other mitzvot with no limitation. The only limitation, as we said, that they have is Shabbat and when it comes to studying Torah. Otherwise, they're allowed to keep all of them. So the question is like this, arises a good question, if they're allowed to keep all the mitzvot like this, which like tefillin and kashrut and all these kinds of things, that means they have to study the mitzvot in order to know how to fulfill them. But you just told me they're not allowed to study the mitzvot. So then how do we reconcile these two things? So we have to reconcile like this. We have to say that they're allowed to study enough to know the laws, to fulfill them. If they want to fulfill the laws of the Torah, they can do that. But what they're not allowed to study is the theory behind it and the sources and all the back and forth and the Gemara and the Talmud and all kinds of things which go into the depths of the Torah. This is called being osek b'Torah, and this is exactly the language of the Gemara. Right? Goy she osek b'Torah. If he's osek b'Torah, what does that mean? He goes into the depths and the theories of the Torah. This they're not allowed to do. But if they just want to get simple instructions on how to do this mitzvah and that mitzvah, that they need to do if they want to do the mitzvot, and if they want to do the mitzvot, they're allowed to, as we said, besides Shabbat and learning Torah. So therefore, they're allowed to get instruction as well. So to get instruction how to do the mitzvot, they're allowed to do, even though this is the outside of their scope of mitzvot for themselves. But since they want to take on more mitzvot, they're allowed to learn how to do the mitzvot. Otherwise, how can they do them if they don't know how to do them? So therefore, there is a fine line here that a person has to be very careful. A non-Jew, and also a Jew who teaches the non-Jew, also has to be very careful, not to cause the non-Jew to sin by teaching him things which are not relevant to him, in theory of the Torah, and getting too deep inside the Torah, the philosophy of the Torah, this kind of thing, there the non-Jew is not allowed to study. So therefore, there has to be a fine line drawn here in order to understand. I heard that there are some rabbis who try to tell all kinds of non-Jews, no hides, all kinds of people like this, that they shouldn't light Hanukkah candles, or they shouldn't light Shabbat candles, and all kinds of things like this. The truth is that according to what we just learned here, there is no prohibition for a non-Jew to light Hanukkah candles or Shabbat candles or to make Kiddush or all these kinds of things. The only prohibition that they have regarding Shabbat is not to, if they refrain from doing labor throughout the 24-hour period, and also all the labor. If they reduce the labor, we don't have any problem with that. They're allowed to reduce the labor if they wish to do so. Teaches further the Rambam there in the Hilchot Melachim that if a non-Jew also wants to do another day as a day of rest, let's say he wants to do Sunday like they do, or Friday like they do, whatever it is, all these kinds of people, that's also not allowed to do. They're not allowed to make another day of rest which is similar to Shabbat on a different day of the week as well. And they're also liable for that, just like they're liable for keeping Shabbat in this manner that we discussed. They're also liable for keeping other day of the week as well. So therefore, a non-Jew does not really have the right to make a separate day of rest like this, which resembles the way that we keep Shabbat. They're not allowed to do it that way. That's the idea. And also, they're not allowed to make up new holidays in order to make like new types of ways of celebrating the holidays that we keep and so forth, and add all kinds of things. They're allowed to keep the holidays that the Jews keep. For instance, like if they want to keep certain elements of the holidays that we do, or all the elements, whether it's Pesach, whether it's Sukkot, whether it's all kinds of things like this, Purim, Hanukkah, they're allowed to keep those holidays. The only prohibition is regarding Shabbat. So what does that mean? That if they want to keep all these holidays to the letter, they're allowed to, but they're not allowed to add something new to our holidays from their own understanding or from their own in innovation. This they're not allowed to do, because now they're making something new, like a new religion. So regarding making a new religion, the prohibition is when they make a new day of rest which resembles our day of rest, they refrain from doing labor just like we do, and something like this. They're not allowed to do that. And also to add more elements to our holidays that we keep. So what does that mean? They can keep the holidays that we keep them, the way that we keep them, they're allowed to keep. But to add some new elements or all kinds of things like this, to innovate some new things over there, which we don't keep, and to make it into like a new religion, so they're not allowed to do this kind of thing. So practically speaking, Rabbi, what happens is that there are many people, non-Jews, who are getting ready for conversion, and they're studying all kinds of things to pass the conversion process, and therefore they need to know, practically speaking, what to do in the meanwhile while they're in the process. So according to what we just said, what should a non-Jew do? A non-Jew, basically, if he wants to practice keeping the mitzvot, to see if he can do them properly, he can keep all the mitzvot, as we said, except Shabbat and except studying Torah. So what does that mean? When it comes to Shabbat, they can keep Shabbat in many elements, in many ways, to do the seudot, to do the meals, to do kiddush, to light the candles like the way we do. That's not really a problem. The only thing they can't do is to refrain from doing the labor all the way like we do. So therefore they should do some labor, some types of labor, in order to show that they're not going all the way, right? 24 hours refraining from labor, and also from all the labors altogether. They can, they have to do some exclusion over there to show that they're not keeping it fully. So this way it won't make them liable until the day they convert, and then they can keep all the mitzvot and all Shabbat the proper way, B'ezrat Hashem. So also regarding studying the Torah, they can study the parts that are they need to know in order to fulfill the mitzvot. If they want to learn more about the mitzvot and learn about them, how it's done, and so forth and so on, all the particulars about the mitzvot, like women are supposed to do. They're allowed to learn on that level. But the way that a Jewish man is supposed to do, to get into the theory and go into the depths of the mitzvot, study Talmud and the reasons and back and forth, and give and take of all these kinds of things. So they really shouldn't refrain from that, because they're not allowed to do that until the day they convert. Until the day they convert, they're still not Jewish. So therefore, the practical way to deal with it is like we just pointed out, Rabbi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'Amen. Chazak u'Baruch, should be healthy and happy and prosperous. Amen ve'Amen.